Hey, Slater Crusaders. America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. I want you to think back to this just last year, this last summer. Who caused most of the violence, if not nearly all of the violence, across the entire country? Well, here's who Joe Biden says you need to be scared of this year.
According to the intelligence community, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
And people oddly applaud that, which is weird. So he gave that speech on the 100th anniversary of what's called the Tulsa Race Riot, May 31st, 1921. On my radio show yesterday, we did the whole story of the Tulsa Race Riot. It's a really fascinating story, a terrible story, of mobs of people and everyone losing their minds. And it's also a story of many white people coming to defense of black people. There's a lot to that story, but the left has grabbed onto the Tulsa race riots and have used it as proof. This is their evidence that America was racist and therefore still is racist at its core. And Joe Biden went on in that speech and he said something like the ties and the connections from Tulsa still ring true today, or some line like that. Then he said, right there, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. That is so absurd. But I thought, okay, where's he getting that? Show me the numbers. What is he talking about? So I went back to the report that he's referring to. Here it is, from Department of Homeland Security. And I read through the report and got to page 18. There's only like 26 pages, something like that. Here's this chart on page 18. It's terrorist attacks posing a threat to life in the U.S. from 2018 to 2019. First of all, that's a weird way to word that. Isn't that right? Like, terrorist attacks posing a threat to life? Excuse me. Microphone fell off. There we boom, we're on. Terrorist attacks posing a threat to life in the U.S. That's a weird way to word that, isn't it? It talks about WSCs. Guys, throw that up one more time, sorry. WSCs are white supremacist extremists. That's that blue line in the middle, that long blue line. They say that white supremacist extremists have killed 38 people. And then all other domestic violent extremists killed only 9 with 8 attacks. Huh? Antifa? Only 8 attacks? Black Lives Matter? 8 attacks total? Like, that's bizarre. Like, how are you calculating these numbers? So I read the rest of the report and it's like, okay, white supremacists killed 38 people last year. I was like, where are they? What? Give me some details. Nowhere in this report does it give any of the data. It doesn't say where they got that. Doesn't say what the definitions are that they use. Doesn't give any context, any story, any examples. It gives nothing. It doesn't define what a terror threat even is. It doesn't define anything. Are gangs considered a terror threat? Like, this report is totally ridiculous. Here's all you need to ask. This is all you need to ask. Go to an inner city, any city in the country. Go find a single black mother in the poorest part of town and ask her, who are you most concerned about when your kid walks to school? Are you most concerned that your kid will be killed by a white supremacist on the way to school? Or are you more concerned that your kid will be killed by a gang member on the way to school? And then tell me who the biggest terror threat is in America. Absolutely absurd, that report. We'll spend more time on that another day, but I just had to come out with that. And it ties into this too, because we are living in just the weirdest alternate reality world that the left is trying to push on you. And don't feel bad if every once in a while you're like, am I crazy? Like, am I going mad? Like, what's happening around me? No, the left, the media, the politicians, they're trying to just gaslight you and drive you crazy. I want to share some insanity with you for the rest of this segment. Just bizarre gaslighting that people are falling for. And if you're not paying attention to the true story, then you'll fall for it too. The left is obsessed with pushing their gay and transgender cult on your kids. It is so bizarre. They have a fanatic obsession, right? And unlike that Department of Homeland Security report, I have proof and I have examples. RUGRATS. Do you remember that kid's cartoon, RUGRATS? It was popular in the 90s. Apparently went on until 2004. There's a reboot of it on Paramount Plus, which is the CBS news streaming network. And the mom is a single lesbian mom. Because why not? So the actress who's doing the voice is in fact herself queer, which is now a word, that's like the word they want to use, queer. Natalie Morales. So I looked her up, and she just recently directed a movie on Hulu called Plan B about 2 teenage girls in South Dakota who are on the search to find the Plan B pill. So she has a nice little history of pushing really wholesome content to kids. She said, this character gives examples of living your life happily and healthily as an out queer person. It's just a beacon for young queer people who may not have examples of that. She loves football, owns a cafe, and she cracks jokes about her ex-girlfriends. So that's the new Rugrats cartoon. Disney has a new cartoon, another reboot. It's called The Proud Family. This was on the Disney Channel from 2001 to 2005. They're rebooting it here, but this time, instead of a mom and a dad, they'd have 2 dads with a 14-year-old black activist daughter. There you go, fantastic. Now, maybe you're like, oh, Slater, you overreacting. These are just characters in cartoons. It's subtle and blah, 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 blah. Okay, try this one on. I can't fathom the person who thinks that this is acceptable.
Hey, Blue, look at all these families. Hi, families. It's time for a pride parade. Families marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. Families marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. This family has 2 mommies. They love each other so proudly, and they all go marching in the big parade.
That's Blue's Clues on Nickelodeon Junior. Nickelodeon Junior is designed for like babies, like 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4, like that's Blue's Clues. And it goes all the way up to 10. That drag queen goes all the way up to 10. Here's some of the other ones. This family is 2 mommies. This family is 2 daddies. Another one is these babas, I don't know what that is, are non-binary. They love each other so proudly. Trans members of this family all love each other so proudly. That one, the trans members of this family love each other so proudly. That is a family of beavers on the Pride Parade float. The beavers, and one of the beavers has scars from having her breasts removed of a transgender top surgery. Like this is on a... Blue's Clues has transgender beavers with top surgery scars on a Pride Parade float. Like, what in the world is going on? Ace, bi, and pan grown-ups, you see, can love each other so proudly. Ace is asexual. Ace, bi, and pansexual. This house is a family of kings and queens. They love each other so proudly. Allies to the queer community can love their queer friends so proudly. And then it ends with love is love you see, and everyone should love proudly. Like, holy cow. What? Like, I mean, that's what I mean. It's like, am I losing my mind here? Like, what? Like, who thinks this is okay? Blue's Clues on Nickelodeon Junior. Here's another segment from Blue's Clues.
Hi, Happy Pride Month! Pride Month celebrates that everyone should be equal, no matter who they love. We celebrate Pride Month because people in the LGBTQ+ community who used to be treated unfairly, now they can be themselves openly and proudly. Look, I made a pride decoration. These flags represent different parts of the LGBTQ+ community. This rainbow flag is called the Gay Pride Flag.
Wow!
This flag is called the Non-Binary Pride Flag. This flag is called the Lesbian Flag. And this flag is called the Transgender Pride Flag. There's so many more flags. Lots of different communities celebrate Pride Month. Bye, Josh. Bye, Blue.
So cool!
This is crazy, right? The next video they play, it's the same thing. They have a couple different of these. And the one is, I think, a boy running around with a bunch of rainbow things with his gay uncle. and how they celebrate Pride Month in their home. And the next video is a little girl putting makeup on her gay dad. And they just have like a bunch of these on Blue's Clues on Nickelodeon Jr. What is... And I think of the adults pushing this. I think of the parents involved here. I think of the executives at Nickelodeon Jr., the people, the producers putting that together, patting themselves on the back for being so woke and progressive and wonderful. These adults are so screwed up. And it's all being pushed on your kids. And here's what's interesting. It's not, we're past the fact, these activists are past the fact of normalizing this, or we're way past normalizing homosexuality and all this stuff. Now they're at the point where the goal is to make you seem like the weirdo for being straight, right? So you're a bigot, of course, but now you're like the weird family with the mom and the dad. Ugh. It's so stinking bizarre. I want to come back. I got more of this coming up next, specifically about how, wow, we got a ton. In the next segment, I want to bring in Palestine, transgender prisoners, and I got a clip from an 8th grade teacher saying that if you teachers don't jump on board with all this critical race theory and everything, then we're going to fire you. We'll tie all this stuff together coming up next. Jeez. Did you see the story that came out yesterday that there's a ransomware attack on one of the biggest meat producers in the country? So remember a couple weeks ago, there was the ransomware on the pipeline that affected gas in southeastern United States. This is a attack on JBS's beef plants all across America that is hurting their supply chains. So this is what I mean. This is like, of course you need emergency food for a natural disaster, which can come at any moment, no matter where you are, earthquake, hurricane, tornadoes, whatever. But now there's all these bizarre threats that are coming, right? Like pandemics causing people to freak out, or maybe some Russian hackers take down food supply chains. And like that sounded crazy a while back, but you saw what happened with gas 3 weeks ago. And right now, we see a ransomware attack on our food supply. What happens when there's a ransomware attack on our electrical supply? What happens when there's a ransomware attack on our water supply? You don't think the Russians and the Chinese are thinking about doing this, / are able to do this, / will definitely do this? Of course they will, and people will lose their ever-loving minds. That's what I really want to avoid. I not only want to be safe for my family and be prepared, I just don't want to have to go to the store. I don't have to want to go outside when everyone's freaking out and panicking. So that's why I called My Patriot Supply right in the beginning of COVID. To my shame, I should have called them much sooner, but called them right in the beginning of COVID. They were wonderful, got the order out as quickly as possible, and I got my 4-week supply right here. You can go to their website, of course. They have everything you need, like emergency blankets and water filtration and everything. For preparedness, but just get the 4-week food supply. 2,000 calorie meals, way better than any other competitor. But My Patriot Supply, they're the standard, they're the best. We have a special website for you, preparewiththefirst.com. So you just go there, get the $50 off the 4-week supply, check it off your list, you're good to go. Preparewiththefirst.com. Spread the word. Boom. Perception versus reality. That's how we're filing what we're filing this segment under. I want to start off. We're going to get to Palestine here. All right. We got a ton to do in this segment. We're going to fit it all together, and it's all going to fit perfectly. This is an 8th grade humanities teacher. I don't even know what that means. Like, I know what the humanities are, but like, what do you actually teach if you say you're a humanities teacher? Anyway, 8th grade teacher in Oregon. And you're thinking, oh, this is just in Oregon. No. There's at least one of these people at your school too, no matter where you are. If not many more, if not the entire school board is run by these people. Here she is.
Catherine Watkins, 8th grade humanities teacher at Cedar Park Middle School, and my pronouns are she, her, we, and us. I'm going to say something that's not nice and not sweet, but it's true. If you're not evolving into an anti-racist educator, you're making yourself obsolete in this field of profession. Our district is only getting browner and browner with our children. And so if, you know, obviously you can't change your melanin, all right, but you can change your mind so that you can actually function in a district that is full of BIPOC children. So if you're being resistant, I understand that, but you're going to have to eventually come to the light, because if you're going to keep with those old views of colonialism, it's going to lead to being fired, because you're going to be doing damage to our children, trauma. And so as we fire the teachers who sexually abuse our children, we will be firing the teachers who do racist things to our children, traumatize them. And while our district might not be completely on there, OEA is working on it, all right? NEA is working on it. And so it's just a matter of time. So it's like you either evolve or dissolve. You've got to start walking with us.
That clip's so amazing. So first of all, school districts and unions don't fire teachers for molesting kids. They usually promote teachers to the district office instead of firing them. So they don't fire teachers who sexually molest kids, but they're saying they will fire teachers for not bowing to and supporting critical race theory, right? And here's why I bring this up, because that rhetorical trick that she threw at the end, we're gonna fire you as a teacher if you're not on board with critical race theory, if you're not on board with the woke brainwashing of kids. We're gonna fire you because otherwise you're causing trauma. Oh, you're causing trauma to kids. That's the rhetorical trick they use, and people are paralyzed by it. Not you anymore because you're aware of it, but that's the trick they use, that you're causing trauma to me. You have to bow to whatever I say, otherwise you're causing trauma. I'll give you another example. Abigail Schreier, she wrote a book on transgenderism called Irreversible Damage. It was banned by Target this summer and got a lot more publicity than it was otherwise. And now it's being banned from libraries across the country. And she posted a picture of someone in Halifax, Nova Scotia, who complained and got it removed from their local library. And this person said, by the way, do we have a picture of the person? Just so you know who we're talking about here. As a trans person, I no longer feel safe. I no longer feel safe using my local library system because you've chosen to keep a book on your shelves that claims my very existence is harmful and questionable to society and children. You should be ashamed, and trans people should not be. But that's it. I don't feel safe. That's the playbook. And that playbook is they're gonna keep using it until it stops working. It works every time right now. All the woke has to say is, oh, you're causing me trauma. And people freeze. People freeze. Oh, I don't feel safe. Oh, okay, whatever you want. We'll get rid of the books. We are so soft and weak and pathetic, and we're letting these people run the show. We're letting these people absolutely run the show. Maybe this is an aside. I hope you had a meaningful Memorial Day. And I hope you had time to reflect on what our veterans go through in war and how war is awful. And I've read over the years and even the other day, so many accounts of people who went through war and served alongside men who were killed. And a common theme kept popping up, that the sound, that these veterans are haunted by the sound of a bullet ripping through human flesh of the person standing next to them. And they can hear that sound all the time. That's the trauma that person lived through. And the rest, like, so many people are so petty today. It's like, oh, this book is causing me trauma. I mean, like, imagine that transgender person talking to the veteran and being like, oh, this book on my library, this book is on my library, I have so much trauma. Jeez. All right, I want to talk about the Oppression Olympics here. The Oppression Olympics is how progressives decide whose side to take on an issue. The goal in America used to be that you can prove, your job is to prove how you can overcome anything, right? You're faced with difficulty, you don't give up, you overcome it, hey everyone, look what I overcame. And we would celebrate that and fantastic. Today, the game is to prove to everyone how much of a victim you are and how you can't even. And how you can't step over even the smallest hurdle in your way. That person can't even exist with a book in the library, all right? And he or she, whoever brags about how weak and pathetic they are. So the left someone on the left, when they're trying to figure out what side to take on an issue, they funnel everything through what is called the oppression Olympics. Let me give you an example here. A couple months back, we passed a law in California that allows men to live in women's prisons. All right, just went into effect January 1st. So men who identify as a woman can now live in women's prisons, okay? So how's that going? It's going exactly as you would think it's going. It's been around for 5 months. 264 men have moved into women's prisons. Now, why would anyone be in support of this? All right? Why would a feminist be in support of this? Why would someone who supports women be in support of this? This is terrible for women. Couple reasons. First, women's prisons, everyone's together. So the woman who killed her kids and the woman who is in jail for shoplifting, they're all in the same place together. Men are not like that. Men are separate based off the severity of their crimes. So you have a man who's in there for a very violent crime and would be separate from other men, but when they decide to go to the women's prison, they're with all the women together. You with me? So you not only go from being a man in a man's prison to being a man in a woman's prison, but you go from being a man in a certain restricted area of a prison into the much more open women's prison. That's the first thing. But how can you be on the left and any person and be in support of this? You have women in prison who are being victimized by this. Okay, let me spell it like this. Everyone on the left assigns a certain number of points based on how oppressed you are. To someone on the left, a woman in prison has 5 victimhood points. 5. First, they're a woman in a patriarchal world. That's 1 point of oppression. Second, they're a criminal, right? And if you're a criminal to the left, then you're a victim of capitalism, right? You're a victim of the system, right? Third victimhood point is they're in prison, which means they're a victim of an unjust justice system. Most women in prison are women of color, so they're victims of racist inequality on them. And then most of these women in prison have been sexually abused at one point in their life. So women in prison have 5 victimhood points. That's a lot. That's a lot. So you would think that people on the left would be in support of these women, the most marginalized, right? But they don't. They're not. These feminists and activists, they're not in support of these women. Why not? Because in the oppression Olympics, the transgender person trumps everyone. The trans person is the ultimate victim in the oppression Olympics. No one beats the transgender person. If any other oppressed group is concerned, the trans person always wins out in America. So I should maybe say in the oppression national championships, right? If you're dealing with America, then the trans person always wins every time. But when you go international, there's one group that can beat the trans people. Internationally, the trans person can only be outdone by the Palestinians. Now you're thinking, hold on, this is weird. What? Why? How can that be? This is Bill Maher last week talking about Israel and Palestinians.
It's amazing to me that the progressives think that they're being progressive by taking that side of it, the Bella Hadids of the world, these influencers. I just want to say, in February of this year, a Hamas court ruled that an unmarried woman cannot travel in Gaza without the permission of a male guardian. Really? That's where the progressives are. Bella Hadid and her friends would run screaming to Tel Aviv if they had to live in Gaza for one day.
But, I mean...
This is a clip of the founder of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors.
Actions, always. The other thing I'll say is Palestine is our generation South Africa. And if if we don't step up boldly and courageously to end the imperialist project that's called Israel, we're doomed.
Okay. Patrisse Cullors would not be allowed to drive in Gaza because she's a woman, but she also wouldn't be allowed to live in Gaza because she's gay. She wouldn't be allowed to live at all. She'd be thrown off the nearest building as soon as she stepped foot there. The economy in the Palestinian territory is non-existent. There's no democracy, which these progressives say they support. The PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, they're contrary to every American and democratic value that exists. As Bill said, women can't drive. So why do progressives support them? Everything is backwards. Everything's backwards. The Palestinian leadership, those are the people who the left should most oppose. But instead, they have the most support for them. Because to the left, everything's backwards. The oppressors, well, in this case, the oppressors are seen as the oppressed. The criminals are the victims. The Palestinians, Hamas, the PLO, they're the good guys against the Israelis. Like the whole thing is backwards. And there's nothing more backwards than their support of the Palestinians, which is why they trump everyone else in the oppression Olympics. Nothing is more backwards than the left's perception of Israel and the Palestinian territories. Bill Maher, in that same segment, he said that to kids these days, you can't learn history from Instagram. You can't learn history from Instagram, right? To the kids who are learning about Israel through memes and quick little graphics online. But to them, it's not about history or the truth. To the progressive, it's all about the Marxist framework. The Marxist framework is who's the most oppressed. And that's who I support. In America, the trans community always wins. And internationally, it's always the Palestinians. What a twisted way to see the world. The perception is that the Palestinians are open-minded progressives, aligned with AOC and other free-thinking, kind, loving progressives in America. So if you're woke and you're for progress and you're for Black Lives Matter and you support women and gays, then you too should support the Palestinians. What's the reality? The reality is if any of these transgendered people stepped foot in Gaza, they'd be thrown off a building. Perception versus reality. Which world would you rather live in? Coming up next, we're going to talk to an author who wrote an amazing piece getting to the root of why people are woke. Like what psychologically is going on that would cause someone to join that cult. Talk with him coming up next. True Story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I am so excited for our next guest, author of the book, Living Spiritually in the Material World, The Lost Wisdom for Finding Inner Peace, Satisfaction, and Lasting Enthusiasm in Earthly Pursuits. We have to talk about that, but he also wrote this brilliant article in the American Conservative called Towards a Critical Woke Theory. We spent a ton of time explaining what critical race theory is and critical gender theory and all this stuff, and we've outlined it all. We did a ton of it here on the show already today. But where does it come from psychologically? Like why is it appealing to so many people, and why does our culture reward this, and why are so many people falling for it? That's what we need to understand and explore. And Dr. Lewis M. Andrews is here. Mr. Andrews, how are you, sir?
Fine, Mike. Nice to speak with you again.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Can we run through your article, because I'm like 90% there, but I want to hear you fill in a couple gaps for me. So
yeah, sure.
So let's start with the younger generation today, kids these days. Why does being woke appeal to them psychologically? What's going on here? What's the root of it?
Well, you know, the critical race theory and the woke kids have these very complex ideas about why most of us do what we do. They have all kinds of theories about privilege and, intersectionality and all that. And they supposedly understand us, but then they claim that they have this critical race theory that explains their behavior. And the point of my article is that I don't think critical race theory has anything to do with their behavior. I think their behavior, particularly of young millennials and Gen Zers, is motivated primarily by a tremendous sense of insecurity and lack of confidence, which is born of a number of things. It's born from partly by the way kids are raised today, to feel very insecure and to feel they have to live up to something in order to be accepted at a good college. When they go to college, and half of them can't even make decisions. They suffer from all kinds of emotional problems. The millennials and Gen Zers, who are the backbone of the woke, they came at a time when the economy was not that good. They went through a series of economic crises. And I think a lot of them are convinced that they're not going to do as well economically as their parents. They live at a time with the highest degree of fatherlessness among all the different groups. And fatherlessness tends to promote insecurity and anger and resentment. And you put these psychological factors all together and you end up with a theory, which says that, which ends up with Marxism, really. I mean, that's where they end up. They start off with a goofy idea that nothing can be known. They go back into history and dissect racial discrimination. Then they claim that intelligence is a white skill, and they end up advocating Marxism, which is really about their own insecurity. They want to go into a society where everyone is guaranteed an outcome because a lot of them are really afraid that they can't make it.
I think that's so true. That's so right. So you mentioned a bunch of reasons why people may feel like they don't make it. And then there may be some realities that are understandable why a kid may feel like they can't make it. I mean, we just look at housing prices where I live in San Diego. Like, if you're a kid here in San Diego, like, you'll never own a house. Like, it's just not happening. So if you have that worldview that everything's out to get me, the system's out to get me, and then you see something like the housing market, then that just reinforces your belief that I can't make it. Therefore, what? Therefore, the system's against me, and what? I need the government to do it all for me, or what's their conclusion?
I need the government to do it for me. We need to figure out who's had privilege. And, although they talk about adjusting privilege, at the end of the day, what they're really after is higher taxes on people who are more successful, so that they're guaranteed certain benefits later in life that they may or may not have earned. And our professorate at the universities, what they should be doing is helping kids to understand that, there are good times and there are bad times. I mean, there's certainly been times in American history when people have faced circumstances much more difficult than the millennials and Gen Zers face today. But what people in the past had was a greater sense of spirituality and a greater confidence in themselves. And the educational system gave them that. Today, the educational system tries to convince them that they're not going to make it, that they might as well just vote for bigger government, and hopefully someone will take care of them.
I want to get to the spirituality part. That can be a good conclusion. Let me go back one more point about the insecurity and resentment. You talk about what the college system, not even in college, the getting into college culture, and how that's screwed kids up. Can you speak to that for a little bit? Because I see this, I felt this.
A lot of psychologists actually, Mike, have been writing about this for years. We have a system which says, you're not going to make it in life unless you get into a good college. And colleges have taken advantage of this by systematically raising their tuitions, far beyond the rate of inflation. But kids are constantly chauffeured around by their parents from one activity to the next, encouraged to do, this nonprofit thing versus that nonprofit thing, pushed to get better grades in order to, meet the expectations of the admissions officers, hopefully of the more elite colleges. And they get there, and the mental health statistics on college kids today are just frightening. More than 50% have suicidal thoughts on a fairly frequent basis. More than 50% are depressed or very anxious. And they come to college with this idea that they have to live up to a certain image. But then once you're in college, you have to start making decisions on your own. What do you really want? Who are you really? What do you believe in? What is your character? What is your values? And these kids are completely unprepared for that. And there was a time when college helped kids with things like that. My book goes into that. But today, professors are just interested in mobilizing young people to get behind the idea that we need a larger government that takes better care of people, because the professor has a vested interest in that. I mean, when the government is making decisions about what to do, they go to professors for studies. And the university really has a vested interest in a bigger government.
Sir, we have to run, and I'm annoyed because I feel like we couldn't get to the conclusion. Can we chat again?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is super, super important. Living spiritually in the material world. I'm going to go by it. Lewis M. Andrews, Living Spiritually in the Material World. Sir, we'll talk soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a wonderful day. Living spiritually in the material world. Let's go out with this clip right here. There's a viral clip going around right now, and it's beautiful. And this is exactly, actually, this is a perfect conclusion. This is what we need to be teaching our kids instead. Let's not just complain about what we're doing is wrong. Let's talk about what we need to do. Do what this dad does.
Daddy teaches you can be anything in this world that you want to be, right? Don't Daddy teach you that?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you're black or white or any color.
Doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, yellow, right?
Black.
And how we treat people is based on who they are and not what color they are.
And if they're nice and smart.
See, this is how children think right here. Critical race theory wants to end that. Not with my children. It's not gonna happen. My baby's gonna know that no matter what she wants to be in life, all she has to do is work hard, and she can become that.
Work hard, even though you don't know anyone. You can make friends.
Yeah, you can make friends, no matter what color they are. So we need to stop CRT, period, point blank. Children do not see skin color, man. They love everybody. If they're good people, they love them.
We pray for people that are hurt.
Hey, Slater Crusaders. So the same woke people who, like our vice president, told you to have a great long weekend, and the president who said, stay cool this weekend, folks, they're running the Pentagon, they're running the VA, they're running the military, they're running all this stuff, and they're all woke from top to bottom. I got the latest example here. There's a bill running through Congress right now which would change the motto of the VA, as if that's the biggest problem in the VA, is changing the motto to make it more woke. Robert Wilkie is here. He's the former secretary of the VA. Mr. Wilkie, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me.
No, good to talk to you. So what is the motto of the VA? What has it been for all these years?
Well, it is taken from the second inaugural address of Abraham Lincoln, one delivered a few weeks before his death. The shortest presidential inauguration. He called on the nation to repent. And the quote that is in every VA hospital and in every cemetery is to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and orphan. We've actually put the longer quote with the more famous beginning in an initiative that I started about a year and a half ago in all of our VA cemeteries to remind Americans of this continuum that began with Abraham Lincoln and lives to this day. VA was born in that speech. Lincoln, I think, delivered the most biblically righteous address in the history of the United States. And he set us on a course for what he believed, and I think history has borne out to this day, that we were the last best hope of man on the earth. Very proud of that. And the sad thing is, this is now the second attempt to take away Mr. Lincoln's words in the name of inclusivity and the notion that Lincoln was a sexist. It failed in the last Congress because Mitch McConnell wouldn't let the House bill come out. But it is making its way through the House, and I have no doubt it will pass again. And the Republicans are supporting it as well in the House.
I think Lisa Murkowski, I believe in the Senate, was one of
in
the
the Senate. That's
co-sponsors of
right.
the bill,
Right.
if I read that right, which is bonkers. So this will pass, and same with all this woke mob stuff. They just keep going and going and going until eventually they jam it through. So what's the problem with the line to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and orphan? What's the issue?
Well, it certainly doesn't meet the dictates of the cultural nihilists who are rampaging through the country. I talked about what's happened just in New York City in the last few weeks when the mayor, who certainly went after Columbus, wanted to remove the statue of Theodore Roosevelt in front of the Natural History Museum, denied a permit to veterans to march on Memorial Day. The only reason they were allowed to march is that he backed down once the courts indicated that they were going to overrule the mayor's decision. But there's something deeper here. Those who can write the past control the present, and our entire ethos is under attack. President Trump said that when the Robert E. Lee statue was attacked in Richmond, that this was the low-hanging fruit because Jefferson and Lincoln would be next, and they certainly are. This vision of America as irredeemably racist, a fallen nation, is antithetical to everything that has happened in the years since the freedom was declared in 1776. I like to quote Harry Truman when he said that this is the only nation in the history of the world to lend a helping hand to all the peoples of the world, including its enemies. That's a little simpler than Lincoln's last best hope of man. But when you think about it, this is the only country in the world where people are fighting and dying to get to.
So let's say they're successful with this, which they will be, and they'll just keep moving on and on and on and get more ridiculous with what they're offended by. I think the issue is here, this is not gender or LGBTQ inclusive enough, right? Specifically, that's their issue.
Right.
Just like Kamala made that joke at the Naval Academy graduation the other day about, Marine.
Right.
Ask any Marine and she would tell you.
Right.
So let's say they're successful here and they keep going. What's the end dystopian future?
By the way, that's my hometown VA that you have on the screen. That's Fayetteville, North Carolina. It sits underneath Fort Bragg and about 90 minutes away from Camp Lejeune. The most important highway in America is Highway 24. It connects the 18th Airborne Corps to 40% of the Marine Corps. The thing that is next is that we're going to see an erosion of spirit. You certainly saw that with the vice president's address at the Naval Academy. If they could have booed, they would have. She said nothing about affirming the greatness of this country. And if you've been to Navy Marine Corps Stadium, it is ringed with the names of victorious campaigns of the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps. There was no mention of Guadalcanal or Midway or Belleau Wood, but she did talk about climate change. I'm a reservist in the Air Force. I'm a colonel. I've been on active duty for the last 3 months, actually until the beginning of May. I sat through the extremist training. It is politically charged. It has nothing to do with protecting and defending the United States. In fact, it is wonderful ammunition, as we saw when the Secretary of State was berated by the Chinese foreign minister, a foreign minister representing a country that has massacred over 100 million of its citizens in my parents' lifetime. He had no answer to defend his country. If we continue down this road, it's not just veterans who are going to suffer, but we eat away at the very national security structure of the country, because the people who join the military, the volunteers, come from the small towns in America. They don't come from New York City or Los Angeles in most cases. They come from small towns across the center of the country. And that's the reaction that you saw to the vice president when she said those things. And there was.
I hate I have to cut you off, Mr. Wilkie, but that erosion of spirit is such a
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, it's true, but it's beautifully said. I'm grateful for your voice and for your courage, sir. I hope we can definitely talk again soon. Thank you for being out there.
Be honored. Thank you for having me.
Very encouraged. Robert Wilkie, former head of the VA, right there. Erosion of spirit, not on this show. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.